Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I am joined by Christoph. Buddy?
Hey. Oh, I was going to call you buddy, so now I'll have to call you Chief. Hey, Chief. How's it going? Great to be back.
Both call each other buddy.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to be a copycat. It's, like when you're in a restaurant and you order something, and I was going to order that thing, and then I feel like I can't order that thing because I don't want people to have the impression like I'm just taking my direction from you directly.
You're overthinking it.
Okay. Hey, buddy.
It is the night of March 27th, 1942. The Atlantic Ocean lies dark and cold, just a few hundred miles off the Virginia coast. Somewhere out there, beyond the faint glow of America's lighthouses, a deadly game of cat and mouse is about to unfold. A duel that will end in tragedy and foreshadow the immense dangers of the war at sea. This is the story of the action of 27 March 1942, a brief and brutal encounter between the United States Navy's Q ship, USS Atik, and the German U-boat U-123, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Reinhard Hardingen, one of Germany's most experienced submarine officers. It is a story that captures the moment when the U-boat menace reached the very doorstep of the United States, turning what had once seemed a distant European war into a fight for survival in American waters. At the beginning of 1942, the U.S. Navy faced an urgent and unfamiliar threat. In the wake of Germany's declaration of war on the United States, Admiral Karl Donitz unleashed his submarines in what the Germans called Operation. The goal was simple: to hunt down merchant ships, convoys, and disrupt enemy supply lines. Choke the industrial heart of the Allies by sinking ships faster than they can be built. Within months, dozens of freighters and tankers were burning within sight of the American coastline. The East Coast glowed red at night from fires at sea.
Wow.
America had entered the Battle of the Atlantic, and it was losing. Into this gripping crisis stepped USS Atik, a ship of deception. Originally a humble merchant vessel named USS Carolyn, she had been hastily converted by the U.S. Navy into what sailors called a Q ship, a warship disguised as a harmless freighter. Her mission: to lure enemy submarines close by pretending to be an easy target, then reveal her hidden guns and destroy the attacker. It was a strategy rooted in World War I experience, when Britain's Royal Navy had used similar vessels to ambush U-boats that surfaced to finish off crippled ships with gunfire. The concept depended on one thing: convincing the submarine commander that the ship before him was defenseless. USS Atik carried a crew of 141 men under the command of Lieutenant Commander Harry Linwood Hicks. Hidden behind collapsible panels were 4-inch and 3-inch guns, along with depth charges and smaller arms. On the surface, she looked every bit the civilian freighter: weathered, slow, and utterly unthreatening. Her orders were to patrol the shipping lanes off the U.S. East Coast, near Norfolk, Virginia, where German U-boats had already sunk multiple vessels. She sailed into those dark waters not as a hunter, but as bait. Meanwhile, beneath the waves, U-123 prowled. Reinhard Hardingen, already an accomplished commander, was on his second patrol off the American coast. He had sunk ships within sight of New York and even dared to surface under the city's glow, watching traffic and skyscrapers with quiet audacity. His submarine was sleek, efficient, and deadly, a Type IXB U-boat with long range, armed with torpedoes and a deck gun. To his crew, the coastal campaign felt like easy hunting. Merchant convoys were sparse, defenses uncoordinated, and blackout procedures inconsistent. But on this particular night, Hardingen's hunt would lead him into a deadly deception. At 1937, a torpedo streaked through the Atlantic, striking USS Atik's forward hold. Flames and smoke billowed into the air. To the German commander watching through his periscope, the target appeared doomed. But appearances can deceive. As Atik listed and slowed, her crew sprang to life behind false bulkheads, manning hidden guns and preparing for the moment the U-boat surfaced to finish her off. What happened next would be one of the earliest, bloodiest, and most sobering lessons of America's submarine war. In this episode, we will take you through that confrontation in vivid detail, how a $6 billion war effort was challenged by a handful of German submariners, how courage and deception collided in the black waters of the Atlantic, and how one ship's sacrifice revealed both the bravery and the vulnerability of the U.S. Navy in its first months of global war. Because this was more than a single skirmish. It was a turning point in perception, a moment when the Atlantic Ocean, once seen as a barrier, became a battlefield. And in that dark water near America's own shores, the Navy learned a hard truth, that even the strongest fleet can bleed, and even the smallest submarine can change the course of strategy.
Oh man, I'm excited, first of all. And a lesson was reinforced to me. We'll be watching a movie at home, and I have my middle daughter is very curious, and so she'll ask questions incessantly about things that have yet to unfold. And I'm like, just keep watching. And then the story reveals it. I had so many questions at the top, and you systematically told me, oh, that's what a Q ship is. Oh, that's where this took place. Oh, interesting. False bulkhead. Okay, wasn't the ship going to sink? No, they figured that out. So I'm ready to dive into the details. I was a little concerned when you said how bloody this is going to be and that it was a former merchant ship versus a submarine. That seems like a mismatch, but I'm just excited to dive in and see what the details bring and how this shaped U.S. Navy convention.
To understand what happened off the Virginia coast in March 1942, we first have to step back in time to trace the strange and perilous evolution of naval warfare in the first half of the 20th century. Because the story of the USS Atik and U-123 is not just about one ship and one submarine. It's about the collision of two philosophies, two technologies, and two visions of how wars at sea should be fought. When the First World War broke out in 1914, a few naval strategists truly understood the potential of the submarine. Traditional naval doctrine revolved around great fleets of surface ships, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, clashing in decisive battles. Submarines were dismissed as sneaky, even unsporting. But by 1917, the German U-boats had changed everything. They hunted merchant convoys across the Atlantic, sinking ships with stealth and precision. They did not announce themselves. They did not fight by the gentleman's rules of naval combat. They struck unseen from beneath the waves, then vanished. The effect was psychological as much as physical. An invisible predator lurking in the deep. Churchill himself later admitted that the U-boat threat was the only thing that truly frightened him during the war. Germany's strategy was brutally simple. Cut Britain's supply lines and starve the island nation into submission. By the time the United States entered World War I, German submarines had sunk nearly 5,000 Allied vessels.
Wow.
Convoys, depth charges, and sonar were born out of necessity to counter the new undersea menace. Desperation breeds innovation, and Britain responded with a clever but risky idea: the Q ship. These were merchant vessels modified in secret to carry hidden guns, manned by Royal Navy crews who disguised themselves as civilian sailors. Their mission was deception. They would sail through dangerous waters, pretending to be an unarmed freighter, hoping to lure submarines close. When a U-boat surfaced, typically to save torpedoes and finish the kill with its deck gun, the Q ship would suddenly drop its false panels, hoist the white ensign, and open fire. The results were dramatic. Some Q ships successfully destroyed their attackers in quick, brutal engagements. But the work was perilous. A U-boat's torpedo could sink a Q ship before its guns were ever revealed, and there was little hope for rescue in the open ocean. By 1918, both sides understood the deadly game of decoy and ambush. The German Navy began to attack from greater distances and with less warning, making the Q ship strategy far more dangerous. Still, the legend of the Q ship lingered, a romantic image of cleverness and courage against an unseen enemy. Fast forward to 1942. Once again, the Atlantic was a hunting ground. After the attack on Pearl Harbor and Hitler's declaration of war on the United States, Admiral Karl Donitz unleashed his wolf packs along the American coastline. He called it Operation Drumbeat. Between January and June of 1942, U-boats sank over 400 Allied ships in the Western Atlantic. Oil tankers burned off Cape Hatteras. Merchant convoys vanished within sight of the shore. The lights of seaside towns were still blazing, silhouetting passing ships for enemy periscopes. America, new to the war, was unprepared for this invisible invasion. In response, U.S. Navy strategists turned once again to the old concept of deception. They would create their own Q ships, armed decoys to surprise the enemy. 3 merchant vessels were selected and hastily converted: Atik, AK-101, USS Astrion, AK-100, and USS Carolyn. They were outfitted with concealed 4-inch guns, 3-inch guns, depth charges, and a small but determined crew. Their mission: patrol the shipping lanes off the East Coast, appear helpless, and lure German submarines to their doom. It was a bold plan, but also a desperate one. The oceans had changed since the days of the First World War. Submarines were faster, stealthier, and relied heavily on torpedoes rather than deck guns. The odds were stacked against the Q ships from the start. USS Atik was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Larry Linwood Hicks, a career officer known for his composure under pressure. He and his crew of 141 men understood their mission carried extraordinary risk. They were sailing into the most dangerous waters on Earth, where dozens of merchantmen had already been destroyed. Atik's guns were hidden under false bulkheads. Her decks were cluttered with fake cargo to complete the illusion of a civilian freighter. Every sailor on board was trained to act the part, even as they stood ready behind steel hatches, waiting for the moment of truth. Their adversary was U-123, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Reinhard Hartingen. Hartingen was one of Donitz's rising stars, a daring officer who had already terrorized Allied shipping during his first patrol off the American coast. He commanded a Type IXB U-boat, a long-range submarine built for endurance. Its 6 torpedo tubes, deck gun, and range of over 12,000 nautical miles made it a formidable predator. Hartingen's patrols were methodical and audacious. He often surfaced at night to attack ships by moonlight, sometimes within sight of coastal cities. By March 1942, U-123 had already claimed multiple victims and was heading home through the same hunting grounds that Atik now patrolled. Neither commander could have known that their courses were destined to intersect. The battle between Atik and U-123 represented more than just a single clash. It was a test of competing naval philosophies. Could deception defeat stealth? Could a slow, armed freighter outwit a submarine built for silent attack? For the U.S. Navy, success would prove that cleverness and courage could overcome the technological superiority of Germany's undersea fleet. For Hartingen and his crew, survival depended on discipline, experience, and the cold logic of modern warfare. But there was another layer of irony here, one that few in Washington recognized. The Q-ship concept, once effective against U-boats that surfaced to fight, was now undated. German commanders no longer took such risks. They attacked unseen with torpedoes and vanished before their targets could react.
Right.
The ocean itself had become an ambush, and the hunter no longer needed to show his face. As night fell on March 27, 1942, the Atlantic was deceptively calm. The crew of USS Atik maintained their quiet vigil, unaware that U-123 was stalking them from beneath the surface. The ship's engines hummed softly. Men stood watch on the darkened bridge, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Below decks, others rested beside their hidden weapons, waiting for an alarm that might never come. For the submariners of U-123, conditions were equally tense. The air inside the steel hull was stale, the temperature rising. Each man knew the sound of depth charges, the fear of sudden impact. They were predators, but also hunted. Any mistake could mean death. And so in the vast expanse of the Atlantic, two vessels, one a ghost ship of deception, the other a shadow of death, moved towards each other. Neither side could see the full picture. Both were bound by orders, by training, and by fate. Within hours their paths would cross, a torpedo would strike, and what followed would become one of the most haunting naval tragedies of America's early war.
Oh, no.
The lesson of the Q-ships, once symbols of cunning victory, would turn into a grim reminder of how quickly warfare evolves and how dearly those lessons are learned.
Oh, man. I was like, where's this going to go? Is stealth going to beat deception? I don't know. But then as you kept talking, I was like, yeah, warfare has changed. And yeah, this kind of worked with World War I, but I'm sure Germany took as many lessons from that conflict as the UK and America did, so they're prepared. And when you said 6 torpedo tubes, I was like, wow, is that 4 in the front, 2 in the back? They seem much more prepared for never having to surface unless absolutely necessary. And they don't have to when they're attacking. They don't have to finish people off with the guns. And I was like, yeah, that's not the way submarines work now, and I'm sure that transition happened at some point. This is like when you're reading a book and you know things are about to go south and you're like, I got to keep reading. I got to find out. And yeah, hang in there, folks. Keep listening. Let's see how this unfolds, because this is something I have not heard as much. I know that there was conflict in the Atlantic between the Americans and the Germans, but for whatever reason, I don't hear as many stories about that. So let's continue. I want to hear what happens.
It is the evening of March 27th, 1942. The Atlantic lies calm, the moon veiled by a thin cover of cloud. To the east of Cape Hatteras, the converted freighter USS Atik patrols alone. Her crew of 141 men are weary but alert. They know these waters are crawling with German submarines, but that's exactly why they're here. Their ship looks like a slow, harmless merchantman, a perfect target. But beneath her weathered deck and false hatches lies hidden guns, depth charges, and men ready for battle. On the surface, Atik drifts at a steady speed of 10 knots. Her lights darkened, her silhouette blending with the horizon. It is 1900 when radar picks up a faint contact. Something small, moving just beyond visual range. The officers on the bridge exchange tense glances. It could be a patrol plane. It could be a merchant ship. But deep down, everyone hopes it's what they came for. Beneath the surface, the German submarine U-123, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Reinhard Hardingen, is stalking its prey. Hardingen peers through his periscope. In his sights, a freighter, apparently unescorted, moving slowly against the current. He notes her shape, her behavior, and her heading. Everything suggests an easy kill. Hardingen orders his crew to prepare torpedoes. Inside the narrow forward compartment, sailors work in silence. Compressed air hisses softly. The final calculations are made. Hardingen gives the command. At 1937, a single torpedo streaks through the water, unseen in the darkness. Moments later, impact. The torpedo slams into Atik's starboard side, tearing through her hull. The deck erupts in chaos. Fire, smoke, and the cries of wounded men. Steam bursts from broken pipes. Within seconds, Atik begins to list. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Harry Hicks stays calm. He knows the plan. Play dead. If they reveal their guns too soon, the U-boat will dive and escape. The ship must appear crippled, helpless, just another victim. He orders the crew to keep up the illusion. Smoke pours from the wounded hull. Men stagger across the deck, some genuinely hurt, others pretending to abandon ship. A lifeboat is lowered into the sea as a lure. Down below, hidden gun crews wait behind steel shutters, hands on triggers, hearts pounding. Minutes pass. Through the haze, Hardingen circles cautiously at periscope depth. He sees the damage, the fires, the lifeboats. No return fire. To him, the freighter appears finished. He decides to surface and deliver the final blow with his deck gun, a standard procedure to save torpedoes. U-123 breaks the surface roughly 2,000 yards from the wounded Atik. The Germans prepare their 105mm deck gun. Hardingen stands on the bridge scanning the wreck with binoculars. The freighter lies motionless, burning slowly. He orders the gun crew to open fire. Shells tear through Atik's upper deck, throwing sparks and splinters into the air. And then suddenly, Hicks gives the command. Hidden gun ports swing open. The quiet freighter transforms into a warship. Atik's gunners unleash a torrent of fire. 4-inch shells roar towards the submarine, tracer fire cutting through the night. The first salvo lands short, splashing near U-123. The second is closer. One round strikes a waterline near the submarine's conning tower. Hardingen shouts for evasive action. Caught off guard, U-123 begins to submerge, but not before another shell smashes into its deck gun, killing one crewman and wounding another. Hardingen is thrown from the bridge, bruised but alive. He slams the hatch shut as water rushes over the hull. The submarine plunges beneath the waves. U-123 dives rapidly, descending to 250 feet. The crew scrambles to regain control as explosives echo above. Atik is dropping depth charges. The charges detonate around the submarine, shaking its hull. Lights flicker. Hardingen and his men stay silent, waiting, listening to the distant thumps fade into the blackness. Meanwhile, on Atik's deck, the crew cheers. They believe they've scored a hit. Smoke and debris are visible where the submarine went down. But Hicks knows the fight isn't over. He orders his men to stay at battle stations. Minutes pass. Then, out of the darkness, the ocean grows still again. No more explosions. No sign of wreckage. The men of Atik can't know that their adversary is still alive and planning revenge. Hardingen, determined and furious, keeps his submarine at depth for nearly an hour. He knows Atik will still be afloat, perhaps even overconfident. When he finally surfaces again, it's after midnight. The sea is calm and the burning freighter is still there, listing but defiant. Through his binoculars, Hardingen studies her carefully. No lifeboats now, no movements. He suspects another trap, but he also knows she's still afloat and dangerous. He decides to finish the job. 2 more torpedoes are fired. Both strike true.
Dang.
One hits near the bow, the other amidships. This time there is no illusion, no deception left. Flames engulf the entire ship. Ammunition begins to cook off, sending bursts of fire into the night sky. Engines die. Her power fails. Men scramble to abandon ship, but the fires spread too quickly. Within minutes, the vessel begins to roll, her hull creaking under the strain. Then, USS Atik disappears beneath the waves, taking her entire crew with her. At dawn, U-123 surfaces again to assess the wreck. Nothing remains but debris, drifting cargo, charred wood, and oil on the water. Hardingen writes in his logbook that the ship fought bravely and died hard. He gives credit to the courage of Atik's crew, unaware that they were part of a classified American experiment. He turns his submarine east, heading home to occupied France. In Washington, the loss of Atik is initially cloaked in secrecy. Families are told little. The Navy quietly reviews the incident, concluding that the Q ship concept, while gallant, is no longer practical against modern submarines. Future Q ship operations are canceled. Though her mission failed, the courage of Atik's crew left a mark. They faced a silent enemy with nothing but determination and ingenuity. Their sacrifice taught the Navy a painful truth. The battlefield of the Atlantic had changed forever. Deception could no longer match stealth. Only technology, training, and relentless adaptation could turn the tide. In later years, even Hardingen, who survived the war and became a respected statesman in post-war Germany, would speak of the Atik engagement with admiration. He called it a fight between equals, each doing his duty. In the end, the sea remembers them all, the hunters and the hunted, the deceivers and the deceived. Their stories echo in the depths, reminders that courage often sails under the most fragile disguises.
That was quite a story, and I have a lot of questions, and they all center around the Q ship. So hopefully you can answer them. If not, maybe there's a listener that wants to send us information because maybe they worked on this program. So when I think about that concept and how they were supposed to play dead, they were supposed to get hit by torpedoes from a submarine to lure it toward it, how did it resist damage? How did it resist being, actually being sunk? Like you said, even after the first torpedo, it was listing. Was there a false second hull or something that kind of gave it a little bit of insulation, so to speak, against damage?
Well, when you go to general quarters, standard procedure is you close and seal all watertight doors. So when you do take damage and you do introduce the sea into your vessel, only a small portion is going to fill with water.
Okay. So that was probably the procedure here. Like they just knew it was coming.
Absolutely.
Okay. The other thing was, you said something pinged off the radar. So did we have radar at this point and able to, how did we detect something was out there? Because I thought that it was developed in World War II, but I didn't know when.
Yeah, we were already using radar in 41.
Okay.
And
that's
we're
right.
expanding radar to more and more systems like ships and then airplanes, shore installations.
I remember you mentioned that during the lead up to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there was a radar operator saying, hey, there's some planes coming in, and somebody thought, oh, yeah, those are, I think, bombers coming in from San Diego or something.
Yeah.
Don't worry about them. Okay, so we are using radar. We are able to see that. Radar isn't typically used nowadays to detect submarines, right? It's more sonar, or how does that? What are the limitations of the technologies, and why do we choose one over the other?
Well, radar could pick up surface contacts,
Hmm.
which, if a periscope is on the surface, it has a chance
Ah,
of picking that up.
okay.
You have to be very, very skilled.
Yeah, because it's so tiny, right? I mean, and you're looking all around you.
And like I mentioned earlier, they didn't know whether it was
A
what kind of
plane,
surface contact it was.
right? So it
They
could have
could not.
been
Yeah.
anything, but it was a periscope. Okay,
And then
so
sonar is used for detecting things underwater.
that makes sense. Okay, wow. So I was just thinking about the bravery of the folks on the Atik because you know you're going to get hit, and you have to have resolve. And the likelihood of you finishing the job, I mean, may or may not happen. This is an untested thing, so you just do your duty and you try and sink the submarine the best you can. The Germans were extremely skilled, and so that was an almost impossible task. Because I have to imagine the captain of the sub was tense the whole time, like at any moment we need to get the hell out of here because things can go sideways. Oof, gosh. Well, that was, I mean, I appreciate the attempt, right? It did work in World War One. Why wouldn't it be worth a try in World War Two? So you mentioned also the Germans recorded in their log. How do, when a ship is about to go down like this, is it customary for the captain to communicate via radio or whatever, hey, we're going down, so that the command structure knows what happened?
If there's time, if you have power,
Right. So we assume because we know this story,
probably
no,
taken from the German logbooks.
okay, that's what I was thinking because the American logbooks, I'm sure, weren't. They didn't have time to write this down, I assume. Golly, that's tense. I imagine this was. So we declare war on Germany December 11th, 1941, and this is March. So we are very early in the conflict. And Germany's already occupying France and they're dominating the Atlantic. This is an uphill battle for the Americans. Golly, what a story. Hopefully, it gets better for the U.S. I
Well,
have a feeling it
ultimately we
will.
win.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't tell them. We got to keep them hooked. The listeners, I mean, hey, listeners, we're doing this for you.
When the morning light broke across the Atlantic on March 28th, 1942, nothing remained of the USS Atik. Only debris drifted on the swells, scorched timber, bits of cargo, and the faint shimmer of oil spreading across the surface. The sea had erased her as swiftly as it had revealed her courage. There were no survivors. 141 sailors, engineers, gunners, cooks, and deckhands vanished into the deep that night. Their ship, once a simple merchant vessel disguised as a trap, had gone down fulfilling its duty to lure the enemy within reach. But the tragedy of Atik was not just a story of loss, it was the turning of a page in the long book of naval warfare. In Washington, reports arrived through coded Navy channels. The first message was brief: Q ship Atik missing, presumed lost in action. Behind closed doors, senior officers studied the details: the time of contact, the torpedo strikes, the false signals, the enemy's response. The Navy had wanted proof that deception could still work against the German U-boats stalking America's coasts. Instead, the experiment proved the opposite. Within weeks, the story reached the press. Headlines were respectful but cautious. The full truth, that Atik had been a disguised warship operating under the old World War I concept, remained classified for decades. Families of the lost crew received letters of condolences signed by Secretary of Navy Frank Knox, assuring them that their loved ones had died bravely in service of an idea as old as the sea, that courage, even in disguise, is still courage. During the First World War, Q ships had been a revelation. Back then, German submarines surfaced frequently to conserve torpedoes, engaging with deck guns at close range. A disguised merchantman could draw them in and strike. Dozens of U-boats fell to the trick. But by 1942, the game had changed. Captains like Reinhard Hardingen commanded modern Type IX submarines, faster, deeper diving, armed with advanced optics, and emboldened by radio coordination from the
Oh, cool.
German U-boat command.
Okay.
Anyway, these skippers rarely surfaced near their targets until a kill was confirmed. Their doctrine was simple: strike unseen, dive fast, and disappear. Against such hunters, the Q-ship was a relic. Brave, but blind. Slow, and without the technological edge to spot an invisible enemy. Atik's hidden guns were useless against a torpedo fired from 1,000 yards away. Her courage could not compete with sonar. The Navy's post-action analysis was blunt. Atik had demonstrated extraordinary valor, but the Q-ship's strategy was tactically unsound under modern submarine conditions. Soon after, her sister ships, the last operational Q-ships, were withdrawn from combat duty. By summer 1942, the United States formally ended the program. Yet the lesson of Atik did not vanish. Instead, it sparked a deeper realization. The U-boat threat could not be met with deception. It required detection. It required science, coordination, and endurance. Within months, the Navy and its British allies accelerated development of new technologies. ASDIC sonar, Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars, HFDF, radio direction finding and long-range patrol aircraft equipped with radar and depth charges. The future of Atlantic battle would not depend on trickery, but on mastery of sound, distance, and teamwork. For the families of the Atik, innovation was a cold comfort. Letters came slowly, sometimes months apart, as the war consumed attention elsewhere. Mothers and wives received medals, folded flags, and terse explanations. Few ever learned the full story, that their loved ones had volunteered for a mission that required secrecy, even in death. In naval training schools, however, the name Atik became a quiet lesson. Instructors told new recruits about her bravery during tactical lectures on submarine warfare. One line from an internal report circulated widely among officers. Quote, "The men of Atik met an unseen enemy, and though they perished, they forced us to see more clearly." That phrase would later appear on a memorial plaque at the Navy Yard in Norfolk. After the war, Captain Lieutenant Hardingen survived captivity and returned to civilian life. He became a businessman and eventually a local politician. In interviews decades later, journalists asked about the Q-ship that he fought. He always answered the same way. Quote, "It was a trap, yes, but they fought with honor. They were sailors, just like us." Hardingen kept a personal logbook of the encounter, noting that the American ship, quote, "opened fire with courage and accuracy," and that he had, quote, "great respect for her commander." He lived to the age of 105, and when he spoke of the war's cruelty, he often cited Atik as an example of valor on both sides. By the end of 1943, the tide had turned. Allied convoys now sailed under the protective net of aircraft, sonar, and coordinated escorts. The once deadly U-boat packs suffered catastrophic losses. Each improvement, every radar sweep, every sonar buoy, carried within it the ghost of ships like Atik. The U.S. Navy emerged from the war with a new understanding of the ocean as a three-dimensional battlefield, a place where technology, discipline, and relentless training mattered more than disguise. The age of the Q-ship had ended, but its spirit, the willingness to face danger directly, became part of the Navy's DNA. In 1956, a small ceremony was held at the U.S. Naval Academy. A simple bronze plaque was unveiled, engraved with the names of Atik's crew and the words, "They sailed under false colors for true purpose." Few outside naval circles noticed, but within the fleet the story endured. passed quietly from generation to generation. Every sailor who has ever stood watch at night, scanning the horizon for an unseen foe, carries a fragment of that memory. The Atik's last battle reminds us that courage does not always guarantee survival, but it guarantees remembrance. Her men died, believing their sacrifice would save others. And in a way, it did. Their loss forced the Navy to evolve, to innovate, and to respect the silence beneath the waves.
That is, I just can't get over the tragedy of how the crew had to endure in spite of the ship listing and then losing every single hand. And then also how highly they are spoken of by their German counterpart and how he lived to be over 100. But through it all, like him saying, yeah, war is terrible, and these fine soldiers or sailors that we battled against were valorous. I think that says a lot about their character, when even your enemy can recognize your bravery. It is good. Again, it's not the mistake, it's how we respond to the mistake, right? And so this was a disaster for the U.S. Navy, but like you said, they were able to respond to it in a way that was more effective, that prioritized the right things to counter the technology and strategy of an enemy, that was honed. They knew what they were doing, and so we needed to up our game also. And I think we did. And it's because we were able to learn hard lessons like this one. And so that's a testament to the U.S. Navy. And I'm glad that they still seem to have that mindset of what are we doing? What are we doing wrong? How can we get better? I think in a previous episode you talked about the Stirling engine-powered Swedish submarine that was so stealthy we had a very difficult time detecting it, and it would have crippled our large capital ships. Again, they took those mistakes. They said, how can we learn from this? And then they enhanced their abilities. And so we're still doing that, and that's really good. And ultimately, it's that kind of willingness to accept mistakes and learn from them that wins wars.
All right, we're going to end this episode like we end all of our episodes by honoring one of our fallen angels with the help of HeroCards.us. And today we're going to honor Captain Lance P. Seagen. His hometown was Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Served the U.S. Air Force 480th Tactical Fighter Squadron, 366th Fighter Wing. He received the Medal of Honor, Purple Heart twice, Distinguished Flying Cross, and the Air Medal 6 times. His date of sacrifice was January 22nd, 1968. Killed in action at Low Prison, or the Hanai Hilton POW camp, North Vietnam. He was 25. Lance Seagen was born in 1942 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There he graduated from Bayview High School in 1960, then left for Bainbridge, Maryland, to attend the Naval Academy Preparatory School. After finishing the Naval Academy program, Seagen was accepted into the United States Air Force Academy in 1965, where he completed pilot training, earned a second lieutenant's commission, and was assigned to the 480th Tactical Fighter Squadron, 366th Fighter Wing, stationed at Da Nang Air Base in South Vietnam. In November of 1967, the Air Force was tasked with disrupting a rapidly increasing flow of supplies along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the main lifeline for enemy North Vietnamese forces. Enemy transport trucks, mainly hidden during the day, and moved down the trail at night through Laos and Cambodia and into South Vietnam. On November 9th, flying a night mission as a backseat pilot in a F-4C Phantom fighter, Seagen was paired with Lieutenant Colonel John W. Armstrong, commander of the 480th Tactical Fighter Squadron. By this time, Seagen had already flown 66 combat missions. Over the Annam Cordillera Mountains, which divide Laos from Vietnam, their aircraft suddenly exploded. It was engulfed in a ball of fire. First reports attributed the explosion to ground fire, but later analysis suggests that defective fuses on the bombs being dropped caused them to detonate prematurely, too close to the F-4C. With the airplane plunging to the jungle below, Saijan managed to eject and parachute through the trees and into the Loshan Mountains. Colonel Armstrong was never heard from again and is presumed to have been killed in action. On the morning of November 11th, American pilots from Ubon Air Base in Thailand and Pho Cat Air Base in Vietnam picked up a signal from Saijan, making voice contact with him. One of the pilots asked Saijan several prearranged authentication questions to make sure it was not an English-speaking enemy, using Saijan's radio to lure the rescue aircraft into a trap. One of the questions Saijan had chosen ahead of time was, who was the greatest football team in the world? His response? The Green Bay Packers. Despite intense search and rescue efforts, the operation was unable to find and extract Saijan from the thick, triple canopy jungle with enemy combatants all around. Saijan had lost his survival kit, and his radio batteries had run down. He slipped in and out of consciousness and had no food or water. Drinking from the dew, rainfall, and mountain streams, he survived on ferns, crest leaves, moss, grubs, and insects.
Wow.
Though he had suffered a fractured skull, a mangled right hand, and a compound fracture to his left leg, Saijan evaded capture for 6 weeks, using a makeshift crutch and crawling through the jungles of North Vietnam, mostly at night to avoid detection by the enemy. He was finally found by the North Vietnamese on Christmas Day in 1967, lying unconscious and emaciated on a jungle road. Saijan's captor took him to a prisoner of war holding area known as the Bamboo Prison, where he was brutally tortured and interrogated. Many of the details of Captain Saijan's story come to us from eyewitness accounts of Major Bob Craner and Captain Guy Grutters, who had also been taken prisoner after their F-100F Super Sabre jet was shot down on December 20th, 1967. Grutters had been a squadron mate of Saijan's at the Air Force Academy just 3 years earlier. Saijan, Craner, and Grutters were transferred by truck to Hao Lo Prison in North Vietnam, nicknamed the Hanoi Hilton by American POWs. Believing that Saijan was close to death, his interrogators were especially brutal as they tortured him to extract information before they lost him. Lance Saijan refused to divulge any information to the North Vietnamese, despite the severe torture employed to break his will. He eventually developed pneumonia and died while in captivity on January 22, 1968. His example is still used in military training as the model for following the code of conduct for American prisoners of war. For his extraordinary heroism and perseverance, Lance P. Saijan was posthumously promoted to the rank of captain and awarded the Medal of Honor. He was the first Air Force Academy graduate to receive the award, which was presented to his family by President Gerald R. Ford on March 6, 1976, in a White House ceremony. The citation reads, "While on a flight over North Vietnam, Captain Saijan ejected from his disabled aircraft and successfully evaded capture for more than 6 weeks. During this time, he was seriously injured and suffered from shock and extreme weight loss due to a lack of food. After being captured by North Vietnamese soldiers, Captain Saijan was taken to a holding point for subsequent transfer to a prisoner of war camp. In his emaciated and crippled condition, he overpowered one of his guards and crawled into the jungle, only to be recaptured after several hours. He was then transferred to another prison camp where he was kept in solitary confinement and interrogated at length. During interrogation, he was severely tortured. However, he did not divulge any information to his captors. Captain Saijan lapsed into delirium and was placed in the care of another prisoner. During his intermittent periods of consciousness until his death, he never complained of his physical condition and on several occasions spoke of future escape attempts. Captain Saijan's extraordinary heroism and intrepidity, above and beyond the call of duty, at the cost of his life, are in keeping with the highest traditions of the U.S. Air Force and reflect great credit upon himself and the U.S. Armed Forces. In July of 2004 edition of Air Force magazine, contributing editor John T. Cornell gives a thorough account of Captain Saijan's story, from the fateful November 1967 attack mission to his capture, captivity, and legacy, the courage of Lance Saijan. Captain Saijan's incredible story is also told by author Malcolm McConnell in his book, Into the Mouth of the Cat, the story of Lance Saijan, hero of Vietnam. To this day, Captain Saijan's perseverance is aspiring cadets at the Naval Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Saijan's Hall was named in his honor. As part of their training, all 4th class, or freshman, cadets at the Academy are expected to learn Saijan's story. The USAF graduating class of 1965 honored their classmate with a bronze memorial by sculptor James Nance. The Saijan Memorial was dedicated on November 6, 2015, and can be found on the Plaza of Heroes, Vietnam Southeast Asia Pavilion, at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado. In 1981, the Lance P. Saijan USAF Leadership Award was created to recognize the accomplishment of airmen who demonstrated the highest qualities of leadership in the performance of their duties and conduct of their lives. The Saijan Award has become one of the U.S. Air Force's most prestigious honors. Captain Saijan is remembered at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., panel 29E, line 62. So, Captain Lance P. Saijan, we thank you.
Thank you.
All right, XO, get us out of here.
All right. Well, thank you, buddy. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us. Man, I always learn a lot. And I don't know if that's due to my ignorance or how compelling of a story information teller you are. Maybe both, probably so. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you want to hear more, you're free to subscribe. You can tell a friend, and then you can talk to your friend about the episode you just heard and say, can you believe the Q-ships were an idea that we had and we thought we would be successful in spite of technological increases by the Germans between World War I and World War II? You can ask them that question, and they can confidently and with information that they gathered from this episode respond with a fully formed opinion. If you ever want to get a hold of us and let us know what you think about this episode or other episodes, or maybe recommend future episodes, you can do that by emailing us at usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We are also on X Twitter with the handle USN History Pod. Message us, tweet at us, whatever vernacular you use for using that platform, you can do that. And then also we have a Discord server that you can join, and you can talk to other folks that are in this community. And finally, you can, like I said at the top, rate and review, tell a friend. That helps us get the word out and just tell stories to more people. So thank you for doing that. I'm confident many of you already have, so thank you.
With that, we're going to wish you guys fair winds and following seas. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.